I want to welcome you to webinar 21 in our Transportation Asset Management webinar series, sponsored by FHWA and AASHTO. The topic of today's webinar is TAM Organizational Framework. So we presented webinars in this series every 2 months now since 2012 and have touched on a variety of topics in asset management. And so for more information on the complete series, I'd direct you to the AASHTO TAM portal, and that's tam-portal.com. From there, you can click on TAM events in the main menu to register for upcoming webinars. And you'll also find archives there of previous webinars, and links to video and to slides from today's webinar will be posted to the TAM portal in just a day or two. So the portal is the home of the AASHTO subcommittee on asset management, and so for information on the subcommittee, also accessible via the portal, just visit tamportal.com and click on Subcommittee on Asset Management under the About menu, and that's where you'll also be able to register for our next webinar, which is on August 10th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and that's on TAM data governance and implementation. So we also want to put a request out for suggestions for topics for future webinars. If you have suggestions for us or comments on today's webinar, you can submit them to us using the Q&A feature on the webinar today. You can also use the contact form on the AASHTO TAM portal website to submit ideas for webinar topics. And we're hoping to announce soon a new tool that you can use to nominate webinar topics and also nominate potential speakers and vote for speakers for future webinars. So we'll have more on that subject to share with you in August. Just a couple of logistical notes as we get started here. We're going to hold all questions until the end of the program today, and then we'll address them to the speakers. In the meantime, please use the chat tool or the Q&A tool on the webinar to send us your questions, and we'll address them all at the end today. Just one last note for our presenters. The audience is muted, but your lines are open, and so just use your own mute and unmute buttons in order to be heard. And I think that covers the logistics. I'll hand it over to Steve Gay of FHWA.
Thank you, Perry. Good afternoon or good morning to everyone joining us today. I'm Steve Gay, leader of the Federal Highways Asset Management Team. FHWA, in cooperation with the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management and our Asset Management Expert Task Group, is very pleased to sponsor this webinar series. We believe this is a great way to connect with the asset management community and bring people together around some important issues. I'm going to be sharing with you a little presentation in a few minutes. I'm not going to say much in introduction today, other than the Office of Asset Management here is pleased to be helping agencies understand the many models for organizations framework within agencies today. As you will hear, it's clear there's no one best organization framework to support effective asset management. I want to say each and every option has its own strengths and limitations, and it's important to understand the potential implications for your agency. I know a question came up, something I saw pretty recently, that talks about local agencies and said, well, for a local agency, do you really need to be asset management? That's just for big agencies. I'll say that in two ways. Yes, it is applicable to local agencies, and not to say it would ever happen here, but I can tell you in the UK and in Australia, the focus of developing asset management plans and asset management is our local agencies. And it seems like they have a good handle on things. In some cases, they're smaller. Many cases, they're smaller. But just managing their limited budgets. And it's not always having this multi-thousand, $1 million system for managing pavements and bridges. It can be done in some cases a lot simpler than that. It all comes down to the framework and so forth. Today's presentations include 3 perspectives on organization framework in relation to transportation asset management programs and plans. I'll also give an update on some FHWA recent activities. Presentations will highlight both successful approaches and lessons learned. And finally, I just want to say that you are going to enjoy today's presentations. I'm going to turn it back to Perry Lubin of Spy Pond Partners to give an overview of today's webinar, review today's agenda, and introduce our speakers. Perry, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So as Steve mentioned, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned and ideas and for knowledge sharing within the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are to building working knowledge of key concepts and definitions that are relevant to characterizing various organizational models for TAM, understanding the specifics of frameworks that are in use today, and understanding how to apply this knowledge in order to answer how agencies' organizational frameworks can help advance management of infrastructure assets, the benefits that states can expect from assessing and evaluating organizational frameworks for TAM, and then also key lessons learned for agencies who are seeking to shift or enhance the existing framework for TAM. And of course, to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. So for the agenda today, we started off with an intro from Steve and from me. I'll introduce our speakers before each presentation, but briefly, for our first presentation, we'll hear again from Steve with a presentation summarizing a recent survey addressing TAM organizational models. Next, we'll hear from Jesse Jones of Arkansas State Highway and Transportation Department. Third presentation will be from Karen Reamer of Connecticut Department of Transportation. And then in our final presentation, we'll hear from Maylin Litter of the Nevada Department of Transportation, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. Just another reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the Q&A feature anytime during today's presentations. And then in response to the question we get most frequently, yes, we will make the slides and videos available after today's webinar. And then for our presenters, I'll chime in to remind you we have 2 minutes remaining in your allotted time. And so for our first presentation today, we'll turn the webinar back over to Steve Gay of FHWA's Asset Management, Pavement Management team. And with that, take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Perry. Asset management and state DOTs. What I'm going to speak about today is based on input from a questionnaires that we use via the SurveyMonkey tool that I'm sure many of you are familiar of, that we sent to our FHWA division offices back in February. Next slide, please. I know I mentioned a few minutes ago, asset management is a way of doing business. We're going to talk about organizational issues and asset management. You certainly recognize that every DOT is different. They have the, and in turn, how they do business, how decisions are made are unique. Applies to local agencies and so forth. Everything from leadership, committees, processes, teams, how decisions are made, priorities set, investment strategies. Every state's different. I think the asset management framework that we all saw on map 21 is a good place to start. And I know we focus on asset management and we refer to it as an asset management framework. I believe that framework may be applicable for making other decisions. Next slide. What initiated it with my office director, Harvey Kalla. Often we're asked questions like, who has the lead on asset management? Where are they? Where is the state in the lead of developing the asset management plan, and so forth? We have sent a few simple questions to the Federal Highway Division officers, and included here is a summary of the results. What office is the lead office for asset management in the state DOD? Next slide. You're going to see how it turns out that more than most, it's in the Office of Planning. But you also have a good bit in the Chief Engineer's office and Office of Maintenance. And the other, which here is about 25%, it was in offices such as an Office of Performance and Asset Management or Special Initiatives or something like that. But I thought that mix was good. And I got to say, I was happy that it wasn't in the Office of Pavements because, you know, how do you capture the bridges and so forth unless you have real good communication. I found that quite interesting. Next slide, please. Status of TAM development. You can see most look like in the process of developing, completing. But let's take a look at the next slide, and it was a little more elaborate on what we said here. State DOP has completed the first draft, 3, completed the first draft of the asset management plan, and is making or discussing updates, 7. I know I was just on a call with Colorado and Wyoming, and they're both in the process of developing their, I want to say, second plan or asset management plan 2 in the draft stage. Just in the process of beginning their asset management plan. I was happy to see the 2 that is still waiting, that they're just waiting for the final rule. What I'm pleased with is that it's only 2 waiting for the final rule. I know you've heard me through the years say, why would you wait? We know basically what's required by MAP 21. And as you saw in the notice of proposed rulemaking, I know it describes a little more detail what you need to do, but I think you have a pretty good foundation just looking at MAP 21. And in the cases of the other, when I look at the notes, they have been well engaged and a draft final has been developed or that type of thing. I know it's not necessarily good to benchmark yourself with other organizations. I think it's good to know, sometimes good to know where you stand in relation to them.
Our next presentation today is from Jesse Jones. Jesse is the Division Head for Transportation Planning and Policy Division at the Arkansas State Highway and Transportation Departments. In this capacity, she oversees transportation planning activities, including long-range transportation planning, modeling and forecasting, geospatial data management, policy analysis, transportation performance management, metropolitan planning coordination, public transportation, and traffic safety. Jesse's been with HTD for over 14 years and has held various positions in design, research, and planning. Jesse's a member of the TRB Standing Committee on Highway Capacity and Quality Service and the Standing Committee on Statewide Multimodal Transportation Planning. She's also actively engaged in various AASHTO standing committees in the areas of planning and performance management, and is also a registered professional engineer in Arkansas. So I will now turn it over to Jesse.
Thank you, Perry. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about how Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department is organized and how the TAM is housed in our department. First, I want to tell you a little bit about what our department's mission statement is. It is to provide a safe, efficient, aesthetically pleasing, and environmentally sound intermodal transportation system for the users. And although this mission statement has not changed in many years, we do to accomplish what it says constantly changes. Our methods, techniques, data, and employees are always evolving. Next slide, please. Today in Arkansas, just give you a little background about Arkansas. Today we have the 12th largest state highway system in the country at over 16,400 miles. That includes the interstate, U.S. highways, state highways, and those state highways carry over 70% of all vehicle miles traveled in the state. And as you can see, we're ranked pretty high for a small state like us. Next slide, please. And then next slide you're going to see is from the funding side, how we rank, which we rank pretty low in terms of revenue. And many states may have some funds other than motor fuel taxes for funding their highway transportation needs. But in Arkansas, we have pretty low in terms of revenue per mile. So obviously it's a big challenge for us to manage a large system with limited funding. A lot of states probably feel the same way as well. So we do have, trying to, particularly this time around, we're trying to focus our attention to more of the system preservation for our system. Next slide, please. When I was asked to do this presentation, the first thing was asked to talk about the framework, how TAM is housed fit into the entire organization, and how everything kind of tied together worked for us. Of course, we have an agency strategic plan that is tied closely to the mission statement, and then under that we have the performance management. One is on the part of the performance management is on the transportation performance management, and then the other one, the other side is on the organizational performance management. But you can see how TAM is fit under the from the organizational workflow. Next slide, please. And so, next slide. So, who's in charge here? Here's our organizational chart for our top-level administration. Of course, our director and our deputy director. And under there, we have the chief engineer, who is overseeing the planning branch, design branch, and operations branch. And we have assistant chief administration is overseeing the human resources and IT support. I want to point out particularly, next slide please, is from the top level administration, the leadership champion for asset management is by our assistant chief engineer for planning. You can see on the slide that with the green box and the red star, he's our leadership champion. And then we also have this steering committee that includes multiple branches of the agency. From planning, you can see program management, who is responsible for preparing the statewide transportation improvement program, and also managing the federal programs. Also, system information and research division is responsible for payment management and road inventory, HPMS reporting. A lot of data collection is done through system information and research division. Transportation planning and policy is where we develop the long-range plan in this division, needs assessment, public transportation, performance management, safety, and also project and program prioritization, investment scenario development. And then under the design branch, where bridge division is located, where a couple staff members from that division also on the steering committee, who is responsible for the for providing input on bridge inventory, bridge side of asset. Maintenance, actually, they have actually the bridge management system. They do a lot of data collection as well for many assets, from culverts, guardrails, to signs, so many. They have a lot of assets that they do collect, and they also have in the process developing a maintenance management system in addition to the bridge management system that's in place. Also, as you can see on the right side of your screen, that's the computer services. Next slide, please. And we call the computer services IT support is the glue. They're the one that connects all of us together to support our mission. So next slide, please. One of the questions I was asked to also talk to you all about is the data collection and management system. How is located, where they're located within our organization. And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the steering committee makeup, the System Information and Research Division has the payment management system. Maintenance Division has the bridge rating, bridge management system, and maintenance management system. They're responsible for those two systems. And in Transportation Planning and Policy actually has the public transportation asset. However, our public transportation asset is been handled somewhat a little different from the rest of the transportation asset management system. Bridge Division and Maintenance Division, both divisions work closely for the bridge management system. Bridge Division, they're responsible for bridge posting, bridge locations, where Maintenance Division is responsible for providing recommendations on preservation needs on bridges. Next slide, please. A few years ago, we started developing a process to make data-driven investment decisions that links asset performance estimates and resource allocation. The evaluation criteria were developed based on agency and MAP 21 performance goals. From that, priorities were developed. We've used this process to prioritize our statewide transportation improvement program projects. And currently, next slide, please. Currently, we have also developed a similar process to look at how investment levels influence performance outcomes and at the program level. I hope this animation works. Perry, can you advance? So when you look at when you change the investment levels, how it would influence your performance outcome for various asset areas. Let's advance one more time. And you can see different, when you have different reduction or the funding level, investment level, how it would affect the outcome on performance, say in safety or bridge conditions or pavement conditions or freight congestion. Those are just some examples. We have used this process for our long-range planning activities and hope to use this to guide our future development. Next slide, please. One more time. Okay, there we go. Another question I was asked to talk a little bit about is the investment decisions, how investment decisions are made. Our organization is structured as the governor appoints a 5-member Commission, and the Highway Commission, we are a constitutionally independent agency, and our commission makes the final decision on how to invest. Take the staff recommendation, the department's recommendation, make the final decision on how to invest in transportation. As you can see also on the left-hand side, we do have program management. As I mentioned earlier, they are responsible for preparing the statewide transportation improvement program, and transportation planning and policy is responsible for performance management, investment scenario, project and program prioritization, scenario development. So those information gets provided to the commission to make the final decision. And next slide, please. From the organizational perspective, it's paramount to have engaged staff and champions in every business unit to ensure TAM success. And this is obviously every organization has its organizational management. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see Gallup Business Journal talked about fundamentally a performance management system is composed of process and people elements. And we can have great processes, but without people, we can't be successful in implementing TAM or TPM principles or any initiative. So it's really important to invest in our people and identifying champions and have the champions taking the lead in developing, carry out those roles and responsibilities in the TAM. Next slide, please. Since I'm from Arkansas, so I want to show you a quote from Sam Walton. If you want the people in the stores to take care of the customers, you have to make sure you're taking care of the people in the stores. That's the most important single ingredient of Walmart's success. And to succeed in this world, you have to change all the time. Next slide, please. I also want to talk just briefly about some of the challenges along the way as we move since MAP 21 became law and performance management, asset management became more like a federal requirement. We have taken many steps to try to move towards this direction, and along the way, like success is not a straight line. Really, lots of lessons learned, particularly in these three areas: communication, and data, and management systems. That there are places we really realized that there were a lot of silos exist within our agency. When we started stepping out of our comfort zone, starting reaching across the aisle, talking to each other, we realized that we have so much to do and so many bridges to build. Next slide, please. So what really, while we're all aware that requirements have been established, rules have been made, and deadlines have been set, only a few have been stepping forward to tackle their TAM responsibilities. And that's why communication is the key. Not only do we need additional champions, we also need liaisons between different divisions to explain how TAM will work for the department and how their data information can relate to others. Letting employees and staff know how they fit into the big picture is a huge step to making this successful. And then fully integrated data means no more data silos. And in order for a department to embrace an enterprise data all in TAM system, we need to understand each piece. And the hope is that instead of being reactive for day-to-day emergencies, that this will help the department to be more proactive to make informed decisions and avoid risk or uncertainty. At the end of the day, we all need to embrace change. And thank you. Now, this concludes my presentation. Now I will turn this over to Perry.
Thank you, Jessie. Our next presentation today is from Karen Reamer of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Karen is a supervising engineer leading the asset management group at CTDOT. Most of her 18-year career with the DOT has been involved with performing and overseeing structure inspections and managing inventory data in the Bridge Safety and Evaluation Unit. Karen led the newly formed Bridge Management Group for almost 2 years before transitioning to the Asset Management Group about 18 months ago. Karen has a BS in Civil Engineering, an MBA, and is a licensed PE. And now I'll turn it over to Karen.
Great, thank you, Perry. I'm happy to share with you today how transportation asset management is organized here in Connecticut. Asset management has been a concern for other commissioners here prior to MAP 21. Efforts had been made towards asset management programs in the past. However, resources often got redirected for other needs within the department. But then in February 2013, our current commissioner issued a memorandum, and it pretty much set the basis for our current TAM structure here at Con.Now, which I'll share with you today. MAP 21 requirement and having sponsorship has really helped us in getting the TAM process underway here. Next slide. So as part of the Commissioner's memo, an agency sponsor, an agency chair, and an implementation lead was designated. Our agency sponsor lies with our Deputy Commissioner, Anna Berry, who's been very supportive in leading this effort from the top. She has a great interest in the process and is pretty committed to pulling together not only our highway assets, but our transit and rail assets as well. Jim Fallon, who is our agency chair, he fits well with the chair position as he has experience on both highway and public transportation assets. And like I said, I've been serving as the implementation lead for about the last 18 months. Next slide. So just to kind of show where we lie with the sponsor, the chair, and our implementation lead. Our chair lies within our Engineering and Construction Bureau. It's underneath the Engineering Administrator, and our Asset Management Group also falls under that same line as well. And as you can see, it kind of covers the executive level, management level, and then also the implementation lead being at the working level. Next slide. So this is what I like to call our wheel of asset management. The process requires coordination and collaboration with many areas within the department. And I kind of look at the asset management group as kind of being the hub of the wheel. So first I'm going to kind of go into, if you want to advance to the next slide, please, Terry. So I'll first talk about the asset management group, who it's made up of, who we report to, and what our roles are. Next slide. So pretty much the asset management group is composed in two areas, in both highways and public transportation. On the highway side, we have 4 transportation engineers. It's a direct report to the engineering administrator in the Bureau of Engineering and Construction. And it's also a direct report to myself being the implementation lead. And then I have an indirect report to our TAM chair. And on the public transportation side, it's made up of 2 transportation engineers and a planner. And they have a direct report to the Bureau Chief and the Bureau of Public Transportation, and then an indirect report to the TAM implementation lead being myself. But the 2 groups together, we meet about once a month to exchange information and ideas to move progress towards making sure the assets that we have on both, similar assets we have on both sides, highways and public trans, that we're consistent in moving them forward across the department. And the groups together are made up of, diverse backgrounds of, experience in bridge management, traffic, facilities design, research, and so on. And everyone brings a different aspect to the table, which is a great combination for this group. Next slide. So some of the roles and responsibilities for the asset management group is development and implementation of Conduct's TAM. We oversee a consultant who, our TAM consultant is helping us through several processes, one being the TAM, but also we also are doing a data gap analysis in the process and a public transportation gap analysis. So they assist us with that process through there. The asset management group is also responsible for coordinating asset management activities across both engineering and then throughout the department, throughout all the department bureaus. And our responsibility is to facilitate progress towards improving, conditions, our inventory systems, and then just sharing data amongst groups. And even though we're a large group, a lot of people say, well, that's compared to other states, we do have a larger asset management group, but we also provide support for the chief engineer's office. We serve the chief engineer, the engineering administrator, and sometimes at times the construction administrator. And pretty much, our thing is to coordinate and facilitate throughout the department. Next slide. So next I'll get into discussing the steering committee and their role in this. Next slide, please. So our steering committee is made up of several individuals throughout the department. In engineering, we have our division chiefs, facilities and transit, highways, bridges, and traffic. We also, on the public transit side, we have our transit and ride sharing and rail. In finance, we have our capital services. And in planning, we have our strategic planning section, which also the performance measures falls under that group as well. In our highway operations, we have our maintenance operations part of our committee. And we have we have our property and facilities group for assistance with maintenance. That falls into the operations and support. And we also have our IT, which is in the management and technology services section. Next slide. So the role and responsibilities for the steering committee is they pretty much act as liaison to the Bureau and to key divisions. Their purpose is to make sure that the interests that they have in TAM are represented, and as well as to make sure that they have staff and resources to support TAM properly in their areas. They oversee and support the efforts of the asset management group through the implementation lead. And the group meets quarterly with both executive level and the asset management group. Next slide, please. So next we have the asset working group. Next slide. So the assets here represented, we have an asset working group set up for each of the assets listed. And just to kind of show, the first column shows the assets that we're planning on incorporating in our initial TAM. And then the other assets would be future TAMs. The second column is highway assets for future TAMs. And then the last column is for our public trans assets to be included in that TAM as well. Next slide. So I just kind of showed here an example of both our pavement and bridge working group. Members are people across bureaus, and they play a vital role in providing guidance. The people selected who provide technical guidance throughout the asset's life cycle. And as you can see, we've designated people as do they play a role of strategic, operations, or data. This list was initially kind of compiled as we were doing workshops and trying to help figure out who the right people were to bring to the table. And we kind of found it useful in moving forward, so we've kind of adopted this. And there's the list goes on with the other assets, but I just wanted to give an example of just for pavements and bridges. And as you'll notice that a steward and an asset management group liaison has been identified for each of the assets as well. And next slide, which I'll later explain. So the asset working group, their basic roles and responsibilities are pretty much the state of the asset. Where is the asset in regards to state of good repair? And what progress, they're responsible for making progress on inventory and condition, making sure we have good quality data and how we improve that moving forward. The responsibility is, progress towards meeting performance metric targets and looking at best practices to meet our needs here, as well as, looking for advancements in knowledge for life cycle or technology. And just to be aware of changes in construction or cost information and changes to asset properties or locations. Next slide. So as I mentioned, each asset working group also has an asset steward, and they're pretty much the champion for the asset. They lead the working group, and they're responsible for facilitating exchange of information amongst the group, developing a program for that specific asset. They're the point of contact for us through the asset management group, and they're responsible for compiling, submitting data for the asset for performance measures, and also we get so many inquiries, both internal and externally, regarding asset data. It's now that all requests should be vetted through the asset steward, just to make sure that there's consistency, because sometimes if something comes from one person and then another, you don't always get the same information. So we're trying to instill that here as well. Next slide, please. So I just want to show here for asset stewards, kind of for each asset, where the steward kind of lies in which section. So buildings and lightings fall under our facilities and transit area. Our pavement, guide rail, retaining walls, and curb ramps is within our highway section. Bridges and sign supports are within the bridge division, and signs and signals within the traffic division. The stewards for bus and maritime fall within the transit section. The rail falls within the rail, and then fleet and pavement markings falls within our highway operations area. And I just kind of pointed out that with the asterisks for pavement and bridge, those areas actually have an asset, a specific full-time unit for bridge management and pavement management. And just to kind of give a little background, those units have been established. For pavement management, it's been established for about 20 plus years now. It has moved around throughout the department as far as where it's located, but is now within our highways group. And for bridges is a little bit newer. It's only about 4 years new. So that group is kind of, still developing and moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. So the role of the asset liaison is that liaison is located within the asset management group, and they pretty much assist the asset steward. And it's our line of communication, like I said, between our group and the steward. And it's kind of monitoring progress of the group, and kind of if changes are needed or, recommendations have come about to communicate that, between, or communicate that to the asset steward. And then just to be aware of, what kind of activities are being planned for that asset, and just kind of knowing how it affects the TAM. And also facilitating implementation of the TAM for that specific asset. Next slide. So the other group I want to talk about is performance measures. Next slide. So because of performance metrics in MAP 21, we are well tied with performance measures. The unit does reside in the Bureau of Policy and Planning, but their responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, are ensuring both federal and performance measures that we've also set for state goals, and make sure that they're properly integrated within our TAM, and also to prepare and post quarterly performance measures for all bureaus. Next slide. So I also just want to mention FHWA involvement. FHWA, and then myself being the implementation lead, as well as strategic planning and project section, mostly an emphasis on the performance measures part of it. But the three meet monthly, and it's a great source of information sharing and kind of keeping FHWA in the loop with everything we're doing. We do invite them to attend our steering committee update meetings, and also for the workshops that we've been holding throughout the TAM process. Next slide. So just to kind of talk a little bit about our strengths, challenges, and opportunities. For strengths, we are a small state, so our engineering section is centralized within headquarters. And even though our construction and maintenance areas operate by districts, all reporting comes through headquarters. So that's been a great strength for us. Everybody kind of being close by in similar areas, and just communicating and exchanging information. Involvement has been great. Involvement across so many of the bureaus that's happened through this process. And just the asset working groups have been a great strength in getting buy-in also. The decision was made to, a thought was, do we move the bridge pavement and the bridge management and pavement management sections to underneath directly under asset management, but it was considered that it's kind of better for us. I think we work a little stronger with those groups being part of the day-to-day of each of those assets. I think the removal might have a little bit of a different effect. So we like the fact that they're involved day-to-day, and then, like I said, setting up those asset working groups has been, I think, a really good advantage for us. As far as challenges, instituting and implementing a culture of change that TAM, for TAM to drive is kind of a struggle. We have, preserving an aging infrastructure where, over half of our bridges are beyond 50 years, and many other assets are beyond their expected life as well. So it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to, implement being proactive instead of reactive, preservation. And the other thing is, a focus of a lot of our division chiefs is delivering the capital program. So it's been, a little bit of a slow process and changing their focuses a little bit. And but I will say, our division chiefs have been very enthusiastic about asset management. They've been very collaborative through the process, but I think it's just kind of a matter of resources sometimes to get that better buy-in. And another challenge has been just coordination of a lot of meetings. It's very time-consuming, but it is great to see when people are, engaging and connecting. So that has been a benefit, but just kind of getting, we're lucky that we're the small state to get everybody in the same room together, but sometimes with schedules and other things, it can be a little bit of a challenge. And other challenge is probably just, standardizing, management of our data and then just data sharing. And finally, in opportunities, I have to kind of agree with Arkansas. It's been, breaking down the silos has been a great opportunity through this process and how we're organized. A lot of issues have come up between the communication of some of the workshops, and so I guess it's just been a positive for us in breaking down those silos. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Our final presentation today is from Maylin Litter of the Nevada Department of Transportation. Maylin is the Assistant Chief Maintenance and Asset Management Engineer at NDOT. She has worked for the department for almost 21 years in various divisions, including design, structures, traffic, and maintenance. She oversees programs including the TAM development, maintenance achievement program, emergency management, maintenance management system, betterments, and maintenance contracting. Maylin also has a BS in civil engineering from the University of Nevada, Reno. And with that, I'll turn it over to Maylin.
Thank you, Barry. So I'll be presenting NDOT's TAM organization framework. Our organization structure for TAM is pretty simple. We did not change organization structure based on the TAM. Our headquarters maintenance division is responsible. We had 2 additional staff to do the TAM, and pretty much just our asset management was added to our name. So next slide, please. This shows our organization chart. The ones highlighted in yellow are the director's office or the executives, and all the whites are the divisions or the districts that are under each of the directors. Next slide, please. Just to give a little background, in 2010, the department initiated efforts to advance NDOT's vision for developing an agency-wide asset management program. And asset management is one of NDOT's goals, including safety, customer service, fiscal responsibility, mobility, freight movement, and environmental stewardship. So the decision structure that was developed for the TAM, or the asset management, was basically an executive committee directing. The decision was directed down to either the IT committee, steering committee, or the tactical steering committee, and then into the working groups. So the TAM, which would fit into the tactical steering committee, and we have others such as like the business intelligence, which would go into the IT steering committee. So depending on what program we're dealing with, it kind of goes with this structure. Next slide, please. So NDOT's asset management goals are to educate the entire department about asset management, to define the scope of NDOT's TAM, to document the current TAM practices and the desired practices, and then where do we have gaps, identify those gaps and fill those. To establish data owners, who creates the data, who will maintain them. It's easy for some of our assets like bridge, pavement, but we're struggling with some others like hydraulics or stormwater assets where, different groups have a hand in it, and then, and then it goes into maintenance, and the hydraulic engineers want maintenance to take over the data, but maintainers are not really, data. They don't manage data. They maintain. So it's kind of a struggle between some of the groups on who is the stewardship. It's just that everybody's lacking resources or staff to deal with the amount of data needed. Other goals are to eliminate duplicate data entry, to collect additional inventory and condition data. Currently, we're working on stormwater assets due to our EPA audit. We pretty much have a whole group of new focus right now is addressing stormwaters facilities. Other goals are to integrate NDOT data, to provide capability for forecasting and planning for the future, to document our business process, procedures, and policies. And then, of course, the main goal is to have sound information so that we could help decision prioritize programs and project spending. In 2011, we had a change of leadership. The governor's office, new transportation board, new leadership in our department, and we have a lot more involved transportation board who have monthly meetings, and they kind of guide a lot of the focus on spending and where the attentions are being given. So momentum has slowed down and focus has shifted away from asset management a bit. Next slide, please. A couple years ago, 2013, with the onset of MAP 21 requirements, priority was placed on developing the TAM to meet the requirements. And we have executive champion from the director's office, and headquarters maintenance and asset management office is the division champion. Mainly, we're assigned to develop the TAMP and update the TAMP. Next slide, please. So this is showing the TAM steering committee, which is the core committee for the TAM. NDOT's Southern Nevada Deputy Director is the leadership, which is crucial to emphasize the importance of the TAM and driving forward the needs to have all related divisions work together to develop the TAM. As all the divisions are lateral to each other, so it's not like we can tell other divisions what to do. So it helps to have that leadership. Our Chief Maintenance and Asset Management Engineer leads the TAMP development. We have one manager and one engineer who is assigned to the project to oversee the consultant and coordination with the technical asset groups and to keep the progress moving forward. Our office has many other duties, it's not like these two staff have their full-time doing asset management. So we don't have enough staff to solely focus on asset management. We rely heavily on the individual divisions to be responsible for the assets that they manage. And so all the other divisions are a part of the core team. So they are all invited, or the representatives are invited. And sometimes it's, with everybody being busy doing other things, it's a challenge to have continued focus on, or having them being continued to be engaged. We included 3 assets in our TAM: bridges, pavement, and ITS assets. So we're lucky to have a great technical group from these 3 divisions to provide information, and also our accounting and financial management divisions are providing the budget piece. So, we were able to get information from these groups, but it does require a lot of time commitment from them. The asset technical working groups are formed when needed for any asset management projects. So they're responsible for providing the asset data, financial data, or evaluating the condition data, estimating the life cycle, and performing analysis and projections for the future. Of course, the major part of our TAMP development is our consultant, Applied Pavement Technology, especially for an organization structure that we have. I can't stress enough the benefits of having an expert in the asset management field to facilitate and bring everybody together. FHWA is invited to all our meetings. We have a great working relationship with our local FHWA office, and we find it very important to keep them informed of our process. Next slide, please. So I've circled here all the divisions that play an active role in our TAMP development. Although we're focusing on 3 assets, there are, some of the districts do participate, and IT, performance analysis, and our planning group do participate, so they can be aware of what's going on with the department's decisions and communicate that message to the local agencies. Next slide, please. On the data side, our IT steering committee consists of mainly the IT project managers. They gather software and data support needs from all the divisions. They work with the director's office to prioritize IT projects. And currently, we have technical groups for the business intelligence project, enterprise GIS, and also we're in the process of letting an RFP to implement a new enterprise asset management software to help the asset management program. So that will help us integrate a lot of the assets. And the modules that we're initiating are bridges, pavement, MMS, and stormwater assets. Next slide. So to summarize key activities and responsibilities for the TAM, the core team determines which assets to address, basically based on evaluation of the department priority needs and the data maturity levels. Each division is responsible to maintain the inventory of the assets they manage. Say for structures, or for bridges, it would be structures division. For pavement, is materials division, and like I said earlier, we're struggling with who owns the hydraulic, the culverts and stormwater assets. Hydraulics is saying that they only design them, we don't do anything else with them, and it's just we're because with the new focus on stormwater, with the wash paths or maintenance facilities, drainage, storm drains and pipes, it's hard to determine who's going to be responsible for them, because it does take a lot of time to manage those. But we do have a new stormwater deputy and a lot of staff for stormwater, so we're figuring out where to put those responsibilities. Each division is also responsible for developing asset management policies related to the assets that they manage. Investment decisions are based on the core team recommendations, but the final decision is up to the director's office and basically based on the governor's priorities. As I mentioned, our governor and the transportation board is very engaged, and they pretty much guide our spending priorities and determine our final performance targets for the TAM. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned from developing the TAMP and working through the asset management structure, having executive support to get all stakeholders to participate is a great help. Communicating our expectations early and our requirements for our required commitments from the divisions. Having regular team meetings and monthly calls to update and make sure that we're on track with the progress. And having a SharePoint site providing all the TAMP meeting documents and presentations and asset management information in one place. Hiring a consultant expert in the field and involving FHWA every step of the way. Some of the challenges that we face were change of leadership and asset management focus that we've had for a couple of years. Not having enough data and resources to include more assets into the TAMP to show a more complete picture of the department. And not having enough financial commitments due to competing priorities. Of course, the governor was new, and with the economic downturn at the time, his focus is more on capital improvement projects, which generates a lot of jobs. So that's been our major focus. Next slide, please. Just a quick status on our TAMP. Our initial TAMP will be completed this month for our director's office approval. But we will adjust and make changes based on the needs of the final rules when they come out. And then we will seek transportation board approval after the final rules or final changes are made. Moving forward, we will implement the EAMS Enterprise Asset Management Plan to include critical assets and improve data and analytics, improved tracking of our maintenance activities, and to quantify trade-off between assets and programs. NDOT is reevaluating our performance measures. So there's a lot of our current measures are based on asset condition and other lacking indicators. So we would like to move forward to leading indicators. Our TAMP is developing this TAMP has demonstrated the value of life cycle costing to support investment strategies. So NDOT will put forth the effort to fully embrace decisions based on long-term life cycle information in the future. So a key step for us is to communicate the significance of the TAMP and the benefits of these results. And this will further help us use asset management practices within our department. And that, I believe, concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maylin. All right, that includes all of our presentations for today. I want to just pause for a minute to thank all of our presenters. Now it's time for Q&A. And quite a number of questions. As you have questions, please just type them into the Q&A feature on the webinar. We'll start now with the first question, which comes from Kay Hopper. And this is a question for Jessie. Kay asks, are total life cycle costs, TLLCA, being calculated? How about the ratio of total life cycle costs to initial costs? And I think this is a reference to the investment level optimization target setting slide that you showed, Jessie. So I'll see if I can pull that back up.
Okay. I think he's probably referring to the slide that might be the 19th, investment level optimization, 21.
Here we go.
No.
No?
There's a slide shows the investment. Yeah, that one. Go back. Are you talking about this slide? Right now, the life cycle is not calculated in the total cost. That's an area that we're still working towards to have a better handle on the life cycle cost. One is try to get the better historic data, how the type of facility, the maintenance records. That's something, the bruises and bumps that we have found was some of the maintenance records, historic maintenance records were not perfect. So some of the cost wasn't really captured very well. That's an area definitely we're working on.
Thank you, Jessie. So the next question is a question for all the presenters, and it comes from Gloria Jeff, who asks how the 3 states are coordinating or integrating MPOs into the organizational framework. And Jessie, since you've got your line open, perhaps you'd like to take the first opportunity to answer.
Sure. Actually, our MPOs are a lot more involved in terms of overall performance management coordination with us, not only just about TAM. We have, through our MPO coordination office, we have monthly meetings with all our 8 MPOs, believe it or not, in our small state. We have 8 MPOs. We have quarterly, monthly conference calls with all the MPOs to talk about several things, data sharing, and particularly on asset data and safety data, and also analytical methodology. So those are the coordination that has been taking place. So the short answer is not. We coordinate with the NPOs not just on the asset management perspective, but more on the overall performance management.
Thank you. So, Karen, before I direct the same question to you, it looks like we have a follow-up on this topic, and that comes from Deborah Lacombe, and she asks, are MPOs or RPOs in your states ahead of you in asset management tracking or behind you? And do they use your TAM information and data for their federal funded calls for projects such as TAP and CMAQ? So I'll direct that to you, Karen.
Okay, so for Connecticut here, as far as involvement with the TAMP, it was kind of a decision made earlier on that we would wait until we actually had a draft TAMP together. So we're expecting that to be later this year, probably August, September time. And then we were looking at doing coordination with them. But we have done, some of them have asked us for kind of presentations on, kind of a little bit of where we're going with things. So that, has been done. There are monthly meetings that happen with our planning group that we try to attend when we can, just to kind of understand, the latest of some issues. And from what I understand, I think they're kind of behind us with things, but we haven't been directly communicating, so I don't know if some of them are advancing or not at this point.
Thanks, Karen. And Maylin, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. We have not been actively including them in our TAMP development, just because we have all the data because we get all the data that we need, and we perform the condition data for all the roads and the bridges. So, and then also we have a minor percentage of the local that we do not foresee them in affecting the percentage or our goals, and we can meet them. So, but our planning division will be bringing the TAMP to them, and I think they have been informing them what we're doing, but it's not really that they're actively involved with our development of the TAMP.
Okay.
Perry, this is Steve Gay, and I'll add a quick comment. Many of the listeners here are familiar with the NHI asset management training courses. We have presented the courses in many states. There is one MPO that requested the course be presented there, and that was the Dallas-Fort Worth, Council of Governments. It's very engaged, interested in asset management. I thought it was a very good training session there. In other training sessions in the States, we have had MPOs and locals participate in a handful of them. So, I'd certainly encourage even using the courses for an avenue to have that dialogue, so everybody's talking the same language. So it's an opportunity. Back to you, Perry.
Thanks, Steve. So the next question comes from Karen Miller, and it's a question for all of the presenters. Karen asks, what strategies have worked to bring about cultural changes in your organization to embrace the concepts of asset management and to implement them? Maylin, would you like to take the first answer?
Sure. At the beginning, when we started really focusing on asset management, we had, the front office, basically an executive director is leading the efforts and having meetings with each division to talk about, what their assets that they're managing and where the asset, what, principles of asset management, and to get them excited and where we're going. That's how we approached it.
Thank you. Karen, would you like to just had the Connecticut perspective on the cultural change.
Sure.
Required.
So I think for us, one of the things that we've kind of done here is, we've done just communicating it through different presentations. We do a bridge, on the bridge management side, they've been able to, they do like a bridge conference each year. So, they kind of get it out that way through a lot of, the bridge engineering side of things. We also have done a lunch and learn event, which is kind of hosted by the Bureau of Engineering and Construction, just to kind of get things out there to the whole department. And I think a lot of the workshops have really helped in making this change. Kind of like, we're not going away. We still keep coming, and we need you to kind of get to the next workshop and, to put this, package together. So I think that has kind of helped, and just communicating. Like I said, the asset stewards are all kind of in their individual areas, but we communicate with them. They have a person through our group that can come to, and I think that's kind of helped just for flow of information to kind of move that along. And I just think from, the support we have from up above with our executive level has been great. And I think that's really kind of, they bring it up a lot of, in meetings they're in. They're kind of always kind of pushing, preservation. And, mentioning the TAM and how this all comes together. So I think that's kind of also helped us in moving along with the cultural change. But it's still one of our challenges.
Thank you. And Jesse?
Sure. I agree. I think some of the panelists already talked a little bit about the leadership role in this whole process about culture change. For our organization, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, are definitely from our commission, our director, our commission are really excited about shifting the way we invest in transportation. The state from used to be more of a capital program type of thinking towards a data-driven and system preservation type of investment strategy, and it's evident by our recently approved statewide transportation improvement program. We now spend about 80% of our program available funds for system preservation and 20% from the capital program. So that's, one from the leadership standpoint, that they are really embracing and taking that leadership in letting all the staff know what the direction the department wants to go. And secondly is the staff members are very excited about the day-to-day that they have to maintain the roadway, that fill the potholes or striping, the signing, the repairing the guardrail. Now they know they actually don't, the leadership wants to help them to do their job better. And we're really getting, the staff members are very excited that what they have to, everything they do today that actually makes a difference in terms of how we invest. So that, from the top down, from the bottom up, we all embracing this idea. I think the only thing we need to change is the politicians, where the feel-good projects, that ribbon-cutting projects, are typically involving economic development, and the thinking is having, if you build it, they will come. But when we can't even maintain our system to a good repair, in a good state of repair, how can we really attract industry? So internally, I think everybody is very excited about this change. One thing from the bruises and bumps is sometimes we're so used to the way it has always been. Making a changing their routine might be a little difficult, but the strategic plan, the strategic goals are very clear, so that helps everybody, nudge and push try to move that direction.
Yeah, Perry, this is Steve Gay again. I know we've talked a bit about this in the past on some regional calls. I think a couple of examples from abroad just addressing the issue of, cultural change and feeding off, I think all three states that just spoke. Leadership in the communication part of things. It's encouraged that maybe using the steering committee and then coordinating with leadership, developing an internal communication plan and an external communication plan are both really important. What's important, what's to be communicated, and trying to address those issues that at least Arkansas and Connecticut talked about earlier, the breaking down the silo thing. Another thing about the culture, it even goes beyond a state DOT. And I know when they had the scans several years ago, when they went to Australia talked about one of the key issues they had was working with politicians and making the politicians realize it was their responsibility that the assets be managed well for the next generation. And we see very little of that in the U.S. Every state's a little different. We all have our politics. There's a commissioner, a commission, or the local cabinet. But having that ownership of being responsible of managing what's there for the next generation, that communication culture issue, just like the question there asked. Back to you.
Thank you, Steve. So the next question is sort of a two-part question. Comes from Kay Hopper. Starting to pull it up here. So the first question is and this is addressed to all three presenters. Are the DOTs spending time and money to bring legacy historic data into the asset management practice? And then sort of a related question, when breaking down silos, how are DOTs dealing with data conflicts and errors? Separately, we got a compliment for you, Jesse, on the slide with the data silos. And so perhaps you'd like to take the first opportunity to answer.
Oh, certainly. I understand completely on that question about legacy historic data, the records. We are actually have been in the last few years trying to converting those historic maintenance data records into a geospatial format. And we have a champion who chairs our department's enterprise data management committee. She actually went to every district, almost every district, actually every district by now, to train their staff to convert those old paper copy records into GIS format and onto our the linear referencing system. So now, and then she also had has done multiple presentations at our engineering conference and various meetings to show how powerful that information or that data is for making investment decisions. So all this, again, showing a unique champion and who believes in this and willing to put in extra effort to make this happen. That goes beyond just making data into information, but also the culture change. And back to you, Perry. Hello?
Hello. So with just a minute or two left, we'll give both Karen and Malin a chance to answer one more question. You can either address the question of data quality and integration, or a question we got from Raymond Tonzik, who asked, what challenges did you have convincing management of the need for resources to do to implement asset management, and how did you approach this subject to get the resources you need? And so, Karen, you can either answer that question or the previous question on data integration and quality.
I guess for the resources, I mean, we didn't have a big struggle for the asset management group in setting up. That was kind of from the commissioner's memo, kind of things happen and staff came in. I think the bigger issue is some of the resources within the actual asset groups as far as keeping things maintained. And we kind of haven't really figured that out of how we can get more assets there. I think it's a little bit of how do we do better with what we have. And even on the, the historical data, we try to bring in wherever we can, but there are a lot of paper records that in some cases we're not ready to go there yet as far as bringing in some of that legacy data. Where we already had it electronically, we've carried that in through our systems, but where it's been paper, we haven't quite made that attempt yet to pull it in. And in some cases, like for our maintenance data, a lot of it wasn't even in our maintenance management systems. It wasn't located. It was type of work, but not necessarily where it was done, where the work was completed.
Thank you. And Maylin, would you like to add the Nevada perspective?
Sure. So we are trying to bring the legacy historical data. A lot of our data that we have right now are in electronic form, but it's in a legacy software that we will have to upgrade when we get our enterprise asset management software. And we are implementing roads and highways, which I guess converts all the different units or location. We like say our MMS is based on mileposts, so they can convert that into a linear referencing system, which would give it a location. So we're, doing everything at once, and hopefully it'll all work when it comes in. Thanks.
Thank you, and I think this is a good opportunity as we close to highlight that our next TAM webinar addresses TAM data governance and implementation. That's August 10th. And now that we've gone just a minute or two over, I'd like to just one more thank you to all of our presenters and to the folks who've joined us today, and close this out. And thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.